So our next TRDI presentation is the Town of Bailey's Harbor UW Extension Community Vitality and Placemaking Team awarded the TRDI award in 2017. So this design team process led local Bailey's Harbor residents and business owners to pursue the design team concepts, resulting in a community center and much more. So presenting today is Mariah Good, a design team member and director of Door County Land Use Services. So with that, I will turn it over to Mariah.
So I am speaking today as a resident of Bailey's Harbor. I do work for the county for the Land Use Services Department, which deals with county planning and zoning, among other things. But in 2015, my town, Bailey's Harbor, was lucky enough to be selected for a UW Extension Community Vitality and Placemaking design team visit, where roughly about 20 people come into the community for 3 days. And it's architects, landscape architects, economists, biologists, artists, photographers, planners, and they meet with as many people as they can. They tour as much as they can, and then they leave the community with ideas about ways to address the issues that the community has indicated are problems or issues for them. So when the design team came to Bailey's Harbor in 2015, they basically said, you guys have great stuff going on, don't mess it up. And we've got ideas that we think will help you not mess it up. We want the community, and they emphasized it should be attractive, not just to tourists. We're a very heavily touristed area in Northern Door County. And Bailey's Harbor is lucky enough that we've got more protected land than any other town in Door County, thanks to the Bridges Sanctuary in part. But there's also a couple of other large preserves in the town. And our town was already kind of trying to be as ecotourism minded and sustainable and green as possible. And so the design team said, those are the things that you guys really need to enhance as you move forward. So this is a visual. If you've never seen what the design team does when they come to a community, they spend all day on the last day drawing all these different maps of what they think you should emphasize. And again, for Bailey's Harbor, they said you need to make sure that you're actively weaving your natural resources through the community and emphasizing ecotourism. So there's a couple of the posters they did for us. They determined in their minds, and from listening to people, that kind of the north end of our downtown is what we should be focusing on to a large extent. And this is another drawing that they did of their vision of what it could turn into to give us some ideas. Definitely said, you know, you guys are too worried about parking. You need to worry more about parks. You need to improve your pedestrian friendliness, especially in this mid downtown area. And we had asked specifically for some ideas about redeveloping retail and recreation, because in 2015, we had a lot of businesses that were for sale in downtown Bailey's Harbor. So we were pretty worried about what might happen there. This is a photo from 2021 of that same area that you just saw the drawing of, because you're going to hear me mention some of these places throughout. So I happen to live over here. The town hall, the library, and an adjacent park are kind of right in the middle here. The fire station is across the street from that. We've got the town marina. Next to that is a property that's privately owned called Nelson's, which was a general store and some apartments and some storage for the Nelson's business. And then we've got across the street, continuing to circle around, Cornerstone Pub, Lakeshore Adventures, which is a kayak and fishing kind of outdoor adventure company. And then Brand Field, which is owned by the town, which you can kind of see back where it says C-Pub, where you see a driveway going through some green space. So the design team suggested, they heard a lot from people that, you know, we need places to hang out, we need places to do things. And they said, you have this giant town hall that you're not really using to its full capacity. And that should be what you focus on as a community center. You don't need to build anything new. And they also suggested that we buy the property across the street, that the town buy the property across the street, which was adjacent or is adjacent to the fire station, so that we could have expanded areas. There's a photograph of our town hall. It's on the National Historic and State Historic Registries. The original building is really old. And then it's also, the library is part of that structure as well. So one of the county libraries is in that building. So as far as using the town hall as a community center, we had one resident that literally the day after the design team was there, she connected with the county to start offering exercise classes for seniors. There's already a senior meal program a couple times a week in the town hall. We started some programming for middle school students, which we had to discontinue for lack of chaperones, but that was pretty popular for a couple of years. And then the library has been getting more active in the community, starting a book group and looking at movie nights and things like that. So the town, and I should say that I don't know if some of this stuff would have happened anyway if the design team hadn't come to town, but I think it just got people talking and thinking. And so, you know, some of this stuff may have happened even if the design team hadn't come to town, but I think they do deserve a lot of credit for getting people talking about this stuff. So in 2019 or about there, the town did acquire that property that we're looking at the back of the town hall on the left now. We did acquire the property across the street that's adjacent to the fire station. Haven't figured out what we're going to do with it yet, but at least the town now owns it and controls it. And then this past year, the town actually voted to rebuild. We needed a new fire station. You can see from the before picture that they could barely get the trucks in the door, and they were having trouble buying new trucks because they didn't even make them short enough when they needed new ones to fit in our old fire station. So we built a new fire station on the exact property. There was some discussion about whether it should get moved out of town, but people really wanted it in town because it's got additional meeting rooms and other things that we can use. Again, building on the idea of having the community center really be, you know, the government buildings that are already available to people. And the property that we've bought that we haven't figured out what to do with, where the flagpole is, and you can see the back of that little blue building, that's the space that we may be looking to. Well, if my kids have their way, it's going to be a skate park, but we'll see. And then a big topic of conversation since the design team came in 2015 was what's going to happen to Nelson's, because it's a big property for Bailey's Harbor next to the marina, and everyone was worried when the store closed, because we all knew it was probably going to close because they have a nicer, newer one on the other side of the county. What's going to happen to Nelson's? And at the annual meeting this year, the vote was overwhelmingly in favor of the town buying Nelson's, which I'm really excited about because some of us were talking about that even before the design team came. So the town will be purchasing that at the end of the year. Don't have exact plans about what to do with it yet, but it's likely going to be mostly green space. Todd Johnson from UW Extension from the Community Vitality and Placemaking team hooked us up last year with UW-Madison through the MBA program. Some students studied a couple different properties for their capstone project, and Nelson's was one of the properties they studied to give us some ideas of how we might redevelop that as a community property. One of the other things we asked the design team for help with was when you're coming into our downtown, actually, frankly, this is still what it looks like, but it's a lot of asphalt and a lot of signs, and there's a big guardrail that we all think is ugly, but that the DOT, because this is a state highway, makes us have on that curve. But so we asked for help to, like, how do we kind of spruce up when people get into town that they know they've arrived? And the design team's suggestion was basically like, duh, turn it into a park, because all the locals knew that it was public property, but nobody else did. So that's what we did. And they suggested a couple other parks as well. So we created a park. We named it Lakeshore Park. We've got a little free library. We got some picnic tables and benches donated. My family and a number of other residents got the town to budget money so that we could put in a wildflower garden right where the bluff is. And then we still have volunteers that are keeping up that garden for us. The town also had a road platted that went to the water that wasn't really a road. People would just kind of drive down and look at the water, and the design team said that could be a park. And so we named that. We've blocked it off so that it'll kind of return to grass, but still have a little bit of parking. So now there's another little just kind of pocket park on the north end of town with property, again, that the town already owned and locals knew was public, but nobody else really knew that was something they could walk down. And then finally, again, another platted alley that the town has that goes down to the water. Always kind of felt like you were walking into the back door of whatever business was located there, or there's a house right there. But so we just named that as a park, and then have these nice benches down there by the water so people can walk down and go look at that. The design team also suggested putting in a community garden. So we've done that behind the building, which is one of the oldest buildings in town that houses the Historical Society and the Information Center. So a community garden went in last year, is the first year that they got that set up. And then again, we had a lot that was for sale when the design team came. This business was for sale. It's subsequently been bought and redeveloped as a restaurant. This is where that little Bluff End Park, the last one I just showed you, is located next to that restaurant. So they're pretty happy to have that little park there. The building that was housing Door Shakespeare, a theater company, and another retail were for sale. Those have been redeveloped with a coffee shop that was already in town but needed bigger space. So they bought and moved themselves down the block, and another retail place moved in last year. And then behind the coffee shop this year, those folks decided to take their 3-car garage and turn that into 3 new businesses, 2 retail and then 1 that's surfboard and skateboard. Because for those of you that don't know, surfing and windsurfing and kiteboarding are big in Bailey's Harbor. And then the brewery that was already in town when the design team came bought, and I don't have a before picture on this one, bought some kind of decrepit and mostly non-functional retail buildings and moved a couple blocks because they had outgrown their original space within the space of like a year. And then that old brewery has converted to a restaurant. And then this is a before and a before picture. This is right across back again by the marina. This is Cornerstone Pub and Lakeshore Adventures. And the design team envisioned more retail in this space with maybe some housing. And the owners of these 2 properties have turned in an application to reconfigure, tear out a lot of the asphalt, put in 3 new retail spaces, including the Lakeshore Adventures business, and then affordable workforce housing on the top for up to 25 to 30 summer workers. So that's going to be coming in the next year and a half or so. This is behind Cornerstone Pub and Lakeshore Adventures. This is a parking lot, but and a lot of us want it to be a park, as did the design team. Once that redevelopment happens at Cornerstone Pub and Lakeshore Adventures, it's not going to be very practical as parking anymore because you won't be able to drive through the property to get back out to the highway. So Bailey's Harbor has a lot of festivals, and we envision that this should be something that's doesn't have permanent fixtures, but could be set up with big tents for festivals or things like that, or maybe the farmers market that we have in the spring. And then finally, a couple other suggestions the design team made, a recycling center. So the town already owned an old town dump a couple miles outside of town, and then reset that up with what was originally 24/7 recycling, and then that didn't go so well because people started dumping garbage. So now it's monitored, and you can go 2 days a week and for free drop off your recycling if you're a Bailey's Harbor resident. Then we've got a lot of other stuff going on that I won't get into too much detail, but we've looked at a lot of things related to affordable housing. We have a business advisory team that's retirees that have said, you know, if there's a business that needs advice about something, we'll offer some free consulting within reason. We've got a group that had started trying to map all the trails, and then it kind of died off. But now a couple of people have reinvigorated that. And we've actually got a retired person that does web maps and digital tours on phones and things like that. And he's mapping all of our historic sites in town, all of our parks, all of our public water access. And so he's putting together, just because he thinks it's a fun thing to do, some things that the Historical Society and the Visitor Bureau will be able to use. We finished a dog park shortly after the design team came. We've got some groups or some people that are working on trying to achieve dark sky status. And then we've got a group that has formed to work on infusing more art into kind of the downtown area. So I guess, and Todd can attest to the fact that there've been a lot of frustrations over the last 6 years because, and I am not a patient person, and I think that's one thing that definitely people that are embarking on things like this need to be. It felt like a lot of times we weren't getting places fast enough, but it does feel in the last year or two like we've really got a lot of momentum and a lot of people now talking about all these different things. So anybody that's doing any process like this with the community vitality and placemaking team, or just doing things on their own, obviously you need to have dedicated volunteers. You really need to have supportive elected officials. We had a couple of mishaps in the beginning where maybe we didn't involve them as much as we should have. And they're the ones, obviously, if you're dealing with town properties, that are going to have to be giving you the okay or possibly budgeting to do the things that you might want to do. And again, I think patience has been key. But it really does feel like we've been making a lot of progress now. We're pretty excited and proud about what we've been able to do in the last couple of years. And I'd be happy to take questions now.
Thank you so much, Mariah, and thank you for sharing that project that just seems to spur and spur and spur. So it's wonderful to hear. And I don't know about anybody else, but I think a visit to Door County sounds like a fabulous plan over the summer and fall months. So I'm encouraged to travel. So thank you for all of the beautiful pictures. So if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat box, and we'll also have Mariah chat her email in there as well for follow-up questions. And then Todd did put an article in there, a blog in there, which is great. And a lot of positive.
Yeah. I can't say enough about that design team program. I mean, both, it's fun because I participated as a resident, but then now I've been part of the design team in other communities across the state, and it's just a great, great program.
So we do have a question. Where does the town get its funds to buy all the land and properties?
So let's see, some of it they've done like kind of the more traditional bonding or whatever else, and I won't even pretend to know all the details about that. The Nelson's property is one of the more expensive properties that the town had looked at buying in a number of years, and our town board chair, once he knew that the Nelson family had agreed on the price that they were willing to sell it to the town for, which is somewhat but not significantly lower than what they would have listed it for, he went out and fundraised. A team of people, he and 3 or 4 other people, went out and raised probably like $500,000 within a month of private philanthropy. And then we're going to be looking probably for that one, since it's waterfront, we're going to be looking at applying for Wisconsin Coastal Management Program grant money, and hopefully for Stewardship Fund grant money from the state as well. But mostly they've just done kind of the traditional, bonding. Bailey's Harbor, we're not even using an iota of the debt capacity that we would theoretically be allowed to use. But that definitely is a concern. And those of you that live in towns know that, a village or a city, they can just decide to buy. I mean, obviously they have to have the money and the mechanisms to be able to pay for it, but they can just buy things. Whereas a town, you have to get the permission of the electorate. So it is always kind of nerve-wracking to have those annual town meetings where the town is looking at buying property. But I'd say we've been pretty successful. Right before the design team, they purchased 40 acres out near our existing rec park. And there are a number of us that want to maybe have like 10 of that be used for housing at some point. But all of that requires a vote. You have to vote to buy it. You have to vote to build it. You have to vote if you're going to sell it. So it's a lot of talking.
Do you have any tips for you? Shared this a little bit. Any tips on that voting piece on how to maybe start those conversations to get support prior to that?
Honestly, I think just talking about it for over and over repeatedly and trying to have as much information as you can. I think the one vote that I can think of that has not gone well or didn't go in the town's favor in the last 10 years was another property across the street from the town hall. And when that got pitched to the electorate, the town had zero idea of what they were going to do with it. Like they just couldn't even answer any basic questions, and it only lost by a few votes. But I think that was a lesson that you just need to be pretty prepared to talk about what they're going to do with it, which actually is, I guess, contradictory to what I said about the Nelson's project and the one next to the fire station, because they don't yet know what they're going to do with those, but they do know that it's going to remain some kind of public property, likely, park-ish, green space-ish.
That's great. And we have time for one final question. Great question here. Do you have a significant volunteer base to help you get these projects developed, or are the city, county staff doing most of the things, such as developing or making parks?
So in the beginning, and I think we were overly ambitious, we formed like 8 groups after the design team was there. So we had a group that was talking about housing, and one that was talking about, parks and downtown and whatever else. And I think we really burned ourselves out because a lot of us were in a number of groups and some of those kind of fizzled. We could certainly use more volunteers than we have now, but at least as far as like the maintenance of the parks, that we were lucky because the town already owned those properties. So town crews were already going in and doing like the mowing. And now it's just, there's a little bit of extra work because we need them to bring in like mulch for the gardens each year or that kind of thing. But so we've kind of done a nice partnership of volunteers and town staff as well.
That's great. Thank you so much, Mariah. We really appreciate you presenting at this summit, as well as our housing summit that you presented on earlier on. So we really appreciate your time and partnership here. So thank you so much.